Time now for the news review of this bulletin. The Persian Gulf Cooperation Council has condemned Israel for expanding its settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories. Condemnation was issued during a GCC ministerial meeting in the Saudi capital, Riyadh. The six-nation bloc of Persian Gulf Arab nations also denounced the Israeli regime's attempts to annex settlements or to impose sovereignty over them. It said the moves are in breach of international law and a UN Security Council resolution. The bloc urged the international community to put pressure on the regime to stop its settlement activities. The GCC also slammed Israel's raids on the Al-aqsa mosque compound in Al-Quds, as well as its attempts to Judaize the city. The Council reiterated its support for the sovereignty of Palestinians and the establishment of an independent Palestinian state with Al-Quds as its capital. Mazen Khumseh is a Palestinian scientist and author who joins us from Bethlehem. We also have David Miller, co-host of Press TV's Palestine Declassified, who joins us from Bristol. Welcome, Mazen Khumseh. I'll start with you. It's kind of confusing, the reaction that we're seeing from the GCC grouping of Persian Gulf countries regarding the settlements. It's a positive thing, don't get me wrong, but do you find it kind of odd that they are coming out right now after multiple announcements of settlements, and not only that, violations that happen on an almost daily basis? Some are pretty bad, but they've reacted to this issue of settlements and some other issues. What's your reading into it?
Yes, the Gulf Cooperation Council has been relatively quiet in recent years, actually, especially being more quiet after the signing of the so-called Abraham Accords, which is normalization agreements between countries like the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain with the Israeli regime. And those normalization agreements kind of chilled any kind of verbal acrobatics they were doing before that regarding their support to the Palestinians. So now things are coming back to pre-normalization agreements in the sense of issuing statements. And statements, of course, don't change things on the ground, and Israel is fine with statements of condemnation, etc., from the Arab regimes. So as long as they are not associated with any meaningful actions. So I think what we are seeing, the timing of this coincidental with the visit of the Syrian foreign minister to Saudi Arabia and other kind of rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Syria, and also with Iran, that the Arab countries, dictators as they are and always supportive of Israel, are back to making statements, so to speak, but these statements will not make a difference on the ground. I don't think so.
Well, David Miller, I guess there are talks about the fact that you have the normalizations that have taken place, but you also have the geopolitical shifts, like Iran, Saudi Arabia reconciliation.
Yes.
And when he says that, David Miller, I look at what just happened recently with the visit of Anthony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, in Saudi Arabia, where at a press conference standing next to the Saudi foreign minister, when the Saudi foreign minister was asked about this normalization of Saudi Arabia with Israel, he said, you know, we can't do that because we have to have the interests of the Palestinians in mind. Now, we can take that for whatever it's worth, but I think given the new landscape, that does carry some weight, doesn't it?
It's an indication of the GCC making this statement. Yes, of course, it doesn't have any impact on the ground, and yes, of course, it's just back to what they were before the Abraham Accords, but that in itself is a positive development. The fact that the Saudis are distancing themselves from normalization, an area which they were very well advanced in their development of, is again an interesting thing. The fact that the Saudis have turned their face away from the US in relation to matters of West Asia, of the naval alliance with Iran, which has just started, in relation to the BRICS and to Russia and China. All of these are tremendously significant moves. And of course, what we wait to see is the effect they have on the ground. Of course, the statements themselves will have no effect on the ground, but they're about a realignment, and that realignment, of course, is one of the biggest hopes that the Palestinians, I think, have in the context of their resistance against occupation.
And you have all this in terms of the different developments, and yet you have one of the things that we didn't hear about, Mazin Khamsaya, and I'm wondering what you think about it, and that is the fact that you had a major announcement that was made a couple days back with this extreme right-wing cabinet that they want to divide the Al-aqsa mosque. I mean, that in itself, they went right for the center and the heartbeat, in a sense, and in a way of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Do you think that we're going to see a more proactive stance from Arab countries, and especially when it comes to this particular issue, which I'm not too sure why they didn't give a really tough reaction to?
I mean, the Israeli policies have been to pick the right time to make the right announcement and get away with certain activities like settlement expansions, like when they invaded and now partitioned Al-Ibrahimi Mosque in Hebron between the settlers and Muslims who own the mosque. Basically is a waqf land. The timing of their events has been always looked at as they find the right opportunity where they can get away with it. I look, for example, at their announcements about E1 when they thought they could get away with it a number of times, and they announced approval or beginning of a process, and then they saw European Union or the US standing against the E1 plan to divide the West Bank basically and increase settlements near Ma'ala Dumim. They backed away from that under successive US administrations because the timing was not right. Now with the Al-aqsa Mosque and the compound, all of it, basically, they are looking for the best time to do this. Sometimes there's a tug of war between the fascists within the government and the ultra-fascists. Those who are in a rush, they want to announce, they want to do things right away. They don't want to wait for the right moment. There's the fascists or the ultra-right with some rationality, and they look for the right timing.
Okay.
So this is where the timing comes.
All right. So David Miller, what are we looking at when it comes to, I'm going to use our guest word, fascists, when it comes to Al-aqsa Mosque being divided? And of course, then are we going to see a trend from the GCC, grouping of Persian Gulf countries, when it comes to some of the important developments like this Al-aqsa Mosque division?
Well, I mean, I think this of course is the tendency, as your other guest has just been saying. I mean, the division of the Ibrahimi Mosque in Hebron some years ago was a firm indication of what they wanted to do with Al-Aqsa, and now they're trying to move on Al-Aqsa. They've been trying to move on it for the last several years. In fact, well, of course, the attempt to subvert Al-Aqsa goes back over 100 years actually, but the intensity of the operation is increasing, and the different factions within the government, of course, want to move at different speeds. I mean, this is the difference between different forms of Zionism, isn't it? That some of them want to kill all of the Arabs and the Palestinians now, and others want to take a little bit more time about it. And of course, they are divided amongst themselves about that, and they try and push each other in different directions. But we are seeing a significant attack on the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and it has to be stopped. The Gulf Cooperation Council, and indeed all other similar organisations, the Arab League or the Shanghai Cooperation Organisation, the BRICS even, these could all have significant roles in pressuring the Israelis back to back off. It's not just a question anymore, it seems to me, of the US turning against them. There may be signs that the US would think that some things are too far, but actually, given the declining power of the US, it now becomes possible for the rest of the world to exert an influence in the way it wasn't only a couple of years ago. So that's the new and dramatic part of geopolitics, which will have its impact on Palestine. And indeed, the resistance and the axis of resistance more widely knows this and is acting with that assumption. So, you know, there are positive things coming, but of course the Israelis will try and go as far as they can to kill and expel and settle as much as they can.
Indeed. Thank you so much for that, David Miller, co-host of Press TV's Palestine Declassified. Masin Rumsaya, thank you, Palestinian scientist and author from Bethlehem. Thank you to you both. And with that, we come to an end for this edition of the News Review.